Dream Psychology by Sigmund Freud, a sleepy summary. Settle in now and let yourself get comfortable. Pull the blanket up just a little closer, let your shoulders drop, let your eyes grow soft and heavy. Tonight we are going to travel somewhere very gentle and very deep, somewhere quiet and warm and full of the slow, drifting wonder of the human mind at rest. We are going to follow a man named Sigmund Freud on a long, careful, tender journey into the world of dreams, into that soft country behind the closed eyelids where the mind does its most secret and most honest work. And as we follow him, as we wander together through the winding corridors of his ideas, perhaps you will find yourself drifting a little, and perhaps the line between reading and dreaming will begin to blur, and perhaps that is exactly as it should be. So breathe in slowly. Breathe out slowly. Let the world outside grow very far away. We are going somewhere else now. We are going inward. For a very long time, almost all of recorded human history, people looked at dreams and said, "These are messages. They are prophecies handed down from gods, or warnings carved into the night air by fate, or signals sent from the spirit world to the waking one." The ancient Egyptians kept dream books. The Greeks had temples where the sick would sleep on sacred floors and wait for divine visions to heal them. The Romans studied the dreams of generals and emperors for signs of coming victory or ruin. Every culture, every century, every corner of the world had its own system of dream interpretation, its own conviction that the nighttime stories of the sleeping mind were meaningful, were important, were trying to say something. And then, for a while, science arrived and said, "No, dreams are nothing. Dreams are just the brain making noise. They are the leftovers from the day, the random firing of tired nerves, the meaningless static of a system powering down. There is nothing to interpret. There is no message. Go back to sleep." But Freud, lying awake in Vienna at the end of the 19th century, surrounded by his patients and their mysterious symptoms and their strange confessions, could not quite accept that. Something nagged at him. Something whispered. He had spent years listening to people talk, really talk, freely and at length, without interruption or judgment, and what he had noticed was that the things that seemed most random, most disconnected, most apparently meaningless, often turned out to be the most meaningful of all. A slip of the tongue, a forgotten name, a nervous gesture repeated again and again without awareness. These things were not noise. These things were signals from somewhere below, from a layer of the mind that did not speak in direct sentences, but in symbols and puzzles and hidden codes. And dreams, he began to believe, were perhaps the richest and most elaborate signals of all. So he began to write it down. He began to organize his thinking into something he could share with the world. He thought carefully about what he was doing and why. He wanted to give people a tool, a method, a key that could unlock what dreams were actually saying. He was not the first person to take dreams seriously. He acknowledged that freely, but he believed he was the first to approach them with the systematic rigor of science, to treat dream interpretation not as mysticism or divination, but as a discipline, as something that could be learned and practiced and refined. He wanted to begin at the beginning, which is always the best place to start, especially when one is sleepy. And the beginning, for him, was a simple and somewhat startling question. What do we actually know about dreams? The answer, when he surveyed the literature, was at once more and less than expected. There had been some genuine and interesting scientific work. Researchers had noted that dreams are largely visual. They are made mostly of images rather than words, mostly of scenes rather than arguments. They had observed that people who have been blind from birth dream very differently from those who lost their sight later in life. They had noticed that physical sensations during sleep, a cold foot, a full bladder, the distant sound of a bell, can work their way into dreams and be transformed into something else entirely. A ringing alarm clock becomes a tolling church bell in the dream. A sensation of pressure on the chest becomes a crouching monster. The taste of something sour becomes a dream of drinking poison. The sleeping mind is a great transformer, a great alchemist, taking the raw materials of sensation and cooking them into narrative. But there were other observations too, quieter and stranger ones, that the scientists had noted and then set aside because they did not know what to make of them. Dreams are mostly concerned with the recent past. The people and places and worries of the last few days tend to show up, but sometimes something very old surfaces, something from childhood, something the dreamer had believed entirely forgotten. Dreams seem to care a great deal about things that the waking mind considers trivial. A small embarrassment, a passing thought, a half-noticed detail from the previous afternoon can become the center of an entire elaborate dream narrative. Meanwhile, the great concerns of waking life, the important decisions, the urgent worries, the things that occupy the mind all day, sometimes simply do not appear at all. And then there is the question of feeling. Dreams often carry enormous emotional weight. A dream about something apparently harmless, a staircase, a field, a stranger's coat, can leave the dreamer trembling or weeping or filled with a joy so intense it is almost unbearable. The content and the emotion do not seem to match. The dream is about one thing, but it feels like something else entirely. All of this fascinated Freud. All of this pointed toward a hidden layer, a layer of meaning beneath the surface, a story behind the story. He began to believe that every dream has two levels: the manifest content, which is what you actually see and hear and experience in the dream, the literal story of it, the images and events and people who appear, and the latent content, which is what the dream is actually about, the real meaning hiding underneath, the secret wish or fear or memory that the dream has encoded and disguised. The word disguised is important. Not hidden accidentally, not scrambled by chance, but disguised. Deliberately obscured. And this is where things get interesting, where the theory starts to take on the warmth and strangeness of the dreams it describes. Deep inside the mind, Freud proposed, there is a part that never sleeps, never quite quiets, never fully accepts the civilized, orderly surface self that we present to the world and to ourselves. This part is ancient and ungovernable and full of desires, for pleasure, for connection, for things we have been taught to want and things we have been taught to deny. It is the reservoir of everything that has ever been pushed down, suppressed, forbidden, refused. It is the place where all the things we cannot say and cannot do and cannot even admit to wanting have gone to live. Freud called this the unconscious, and he described it as being full of wishes, not gentle, well-behaved wishes, but urgent, insistent, sometimes alarming wishes that press constantly against the walls of consciousness, looking for a way out. During waking life, a force that Freud called the censor keeps these wishes in check. The censor is the part of the mind that knows the rules, that enforces the standards of decency and propriety, that translates raw desire into acceptable behavior or suppresses it entirely. It works vigilantly, tirelessly, maintaining the polite fiction of the civilized self. But when we sleep, something shifts. The censor does not disappear, it remains on duty, still watchful, still protective, but it relaxes somewhat. It loosens its grip. And in that loosening, the wishes that have been held back all day, all year, all life begin to stir and press forward. They want to come out, and dreams, Freud proposed, are how they do it. Dreams are the royal road, his famous phrase, the royal road to the unconscious, the path the suppressed wishes travel when the night gives them a little room to move. But the censor, even in its relaxed nighttime state, is still there. It cannot allow the wishes to express themselves directly. It cannot let the dreamer simply experience the raw, unfiltered content of the unconscious. That would be too disturbing, would wake the dreamer, would rupture the carefully maintained sense of self. So the wishes are transformed, encoded, disguised into something safer and stranger, something that can be experienced without recognition, something the dreamer can watch unfolding without realizing what they are actually seeing. This transformation is the dream work. This is the central concept, the machinery at the heart of everything Freud wanted to say. The dream work is the set of processes by which the unconscious wish is converted into the manifest content of the dream, the process by which the raw material of desire is cooked into the strange, symbolic, often baffling story that plays out behind your closed eyes on any given night. Understanding the dream work is the key to reading dreams. It is the cipher, the decoder ring, the grammar of the language that dreams speak. And the dream work, Freud described, operates through several main mechanisms, each one wonderful in its own way, each one deserving of slow and careful attention. The first mechanism is condensation. Condensation is the way dreams pack enormous amounts of material into very small packages. A single figure in a dream might be, at the same time, your mother and your oldest friend and a teacher from childhood, and some quality of your own personality that you cannot quite name. The dream has fused all of these people together into a single composite figure, and each detail of that figure carries meaning from each of the sources. A dream image might simultaneously represent 2 memories, 3 fears, and a wish from 20 years ago, all compressed into one moment. The dream is extraordinarily economical. It uses one image to do the work of many thoughts, layering meanings on top of each other, the way sedimentary rock layers one era upon another. This is why the manifest content of a dream is almost always much simpler and shorter than the latent content. The dream is a dense compression, a kind of psychic shorthand, and unpacking it requires enormous patience and attention. The second mechanism is displacement. If condensation is about packing many things into one, displacement is about moving emotional energy away from its true source and attaching it to something else. The thing in the dream that carries the most intense feeling, the thing that makes the dream vivid and charged and memorable, is often not the thing the dream is really about. The most intense emotion in the dream might be attached to something trivial, something peripheral, something that seems barely worth noticing, while the truly significant material lurks at the edges, appearing modest and unremarkable. This is the sense's cleverness. By moving the emotional heat away from the real subject, it allows the real subject to appear without being recognized. The dreamer focuses on the intensely felt peripheral thing and does not notice the quiet, central thing, which is the actual wish, the actual fear, the actual secret. Displacement is how the dream disguises its own most important content. It is a kind of psychic sleight of hand, a misdirection. The third mechanism is representability, the process by which abstract thoughts are converted into visual images. Dreams think in pictures, not in propositions. They cannot say directly, "I am afraid of failing," or "I wish I had been kinder to my father," or "I want something I cannot name." They must show these things, must dramatize them, must find concrete sensory images to carry abstract meaning. So failure might be represented as falling, or as missing a train, or as arriving at an examination without having studied. Longing might become an endless road, or a door that will not open, or a light visible through a window in a house you cannot enter. Unacknowledged anger might become a storm or a fire, or something sharp and breaking. The dreaming mind is a poet, forever turning the abstract into the visible, forever finding images to body forth what cannot be stated plainly. The fourth mechanism is secondary revision, and this one happens, interestingly, at the border between sleeping and waking. When we begin to wake up, when consciousness starts to reassemble itself, it looks at the dream material and begins to tidy it up, to impose a narrative logic on what was actually a series of loosely connected images and feelings. Secondary revision is the part of the mind that says, "There must be a story here, there must be a sequence, there must be cause and effect." And so it arranges and rearranges, fills in gaps, smooths over contradictions, adds connecting tissue that was not there in the original dream. The dream you remember upon waking is not quite the dream you actually had. It has been edited, organized, made slightly more coherent by this last-minute revision. This is why Freud stressed the importance of trying to capture dreams as quickly and as faithfully as possible, before secondary revision has finished its work, before the neat narrative has fully replaced the stranger, rawer original. Together, these mechanisms, condensation, displacement, representability, secondary revision, constitute the dream work, the system by which the mind translates its most secret and most pressing material into the strange language of dreams. Learning to read this language is what dream interpretation is, and Freud offered a method for doing it. The method is free association. You take a dream, ideally a real dream, remembered as precisely as possible, written down as soon as possible after waking, and you take it apart. You take each element of the dream, each image, each person, each scene, each detail that stands out, and you let your mind wander freely from it. You do not try to explain it or analyze it deliberately. You simply say, "When I think of this thing, what comes to mind?" And then whatever comes to mind, you follow that. And whatever comes from that, you follow that too. You allow yourself to produce a chain of associations, following each one without judgment or censorship, without dismissing anything as too silly or too shameful or too unrelated, because nothing is unrelated. The path of free association, allowed to go where it wants to go, will eventually lead back to the source, to the latent content, to the hidden wish, to the memory or feeling or desire that the dream was constructed to both express and conceal. This is slow work. It requires patience, and it requires honesty, and it requires a willingness to follow the path even when it leads somewhere uncomfortable. Often the associations that feel most irrelevant, most random, most silly are the most important ones, because the sensor puts up the most resistance in the places that matter most, and resistance often feels like blankness or dismissal or the conviction that something is too trivial to bother with. Freud was clear about this. Resistance is information. When you hit a wall in free association, when you suddenly feel that there is nothing more to say about a particular image, or that what comes to mind is too unimportant to mention, or that you have somehow gotten off track, that is the sensor doing its work. That is the border of something significant. The right response is not to accept the wall and move on, but to sit with it, to notice it, to say, here is where something is hiding. Now Freud wanted to talk about a specific kind of wish that dreams most often express, and he introduced it carefully, because it is the kind of idea that tends to make people uncomfortable. He proposed that a very large proportion of adult dreams, especially the strangest and most disturbing ones, the ones that leave behind the deepest feeling of wrongness or shame or confusion, are rooted in wishes that originated in childhood. Specifically, wishes connected to the people who were most important in early life: parents, siblings, the figures who populated the small, intense world of childhood. The child, Freud believed, is not the innocent, asexual creature that the Victorian world liked to imagine. The child is a feeling creature, full of love and need and jealousy and desire, organized in complex ways around the people it depends on most. It loves intensely, wants exclusively, feels rage and rivalry and tenderness all at once. These feelings, as the child grows, are gradually repressed, buried under layers of socialization and shame and forgetting. But they do not disappear. They persist in the unconscious, as vivid and urgent as ever, even decades later, even in middle age, even in old age. And sometimes, when the sensor relaxes in sleep, they surface, not as memories, but as dreams, disguised and displaced but still there, still carrying the original emotional charge. This is one of the most famous and most debated parts of Freud's thinking, and he did not pretend it would be easy to accept. He acknowledged that the idea of finding infantile wishes at the root of adult dreams might feel strange, might feel like an insult to the complexity of adult experience, might seem to reduce the richness of dream life to something too simple and too unsettling. But he held to it. He believed the evidence of his clinical work demanded it. Again and again, following the chain of associations from a patient's dream, he found himself arriving at childhood, at early relationship, at the fundamental attachments of infancy and early life. He also believed that anxiety dreams, the nightmares, the terrifying dreams that wake the sleeper with a pounding heart, are not exceptions to the rule of wish fulfillment. They are wish fulfillment too. The mechanism is the same. It is just that the wish being expressed is one that generates anxiety in the waking self, one that the censor finds especially threatening. The censor struggles to suppress this wish, partially succeeds but not entirely, and what escapes takes the form of anxiety. The wish disguised as its own punishment, the desire half expressed and immediately condemned. The nightmare is a wish the dreamer cannot quite face, but cannot quite silence, a wish pressing forward and being met with the dreamer's own terror. Punishment dreams work similarly. A dream in which you are being chased, accused, humiliated, hurt, this too can be understood as wish fulfillment, but wish fulfillment of a particular and painful kind. Part of the mind wishes for something. Another part of the mind believes that wanting this thing deserves punishment. And so the dream enacts both the expression of the wish and the punishment for it simultaneously. The two parts of the mind argue out their conflict in the theater of the dream. Freud spent time thinking about dreams that seem to involve bodily needs. The dream of drinking when you are thirsty, the dream of eating when you are hungry, the dream of using the bathroom when the body is signaling that need. These dreams are, in a sense, the simplest examples of wish fulfillment. The body wants something, the sleeping mind creates a dream in which that want is satisfied, and this little performance of satisfaction allows sleep to continue just a little longer rather than having the need wake the sleeper up. Even the simplest physical wish, the most basic bodily desire, gets processed and handled and responded to by the dreaming mind's wish fulfillment machinery. He also discussed the peculiar dreams of very young children, which he noted are often quite transparent in their wish fulfillment, nothing like the elaborate, disguised, symbolic productions of adult dreams. A small child who was refused cherries at dinner dreams simply and joyfully about eating cherries. A child who was kept from a picnic dreams of being at the picnic, playing and eating and running. The young child's dreams are like little first drafts, unrevised and unencoded, direct expressions of the wish without the sensor's heavy editing. As the child grows, as the sensor develops, as more wishes are repressed and more material must be hidden, the dreams become progressively more complex, more displaced, more symbolically elaborate. The growth of the dream's complexity is, in a way, the story of the development of the inner life and the accumulation of what must be hidden from it. This idea that childhood dreams are simpler and clearer than adult dreams points towards something important in Freud's overall view, that the sleeping mind in some ways is also a more primitive mind. When we sleep, we regress, not entirely, not dangerously, but meaningfully, to an earlier mode of mental functioning. We think in images rather than words. We feel rather than reason. We follow association rather than logic. The temporal sense dissolves. Something from last Tuesday and something from 30 years ago appear side by side without contradiction, because in dreams time does not flow in one direction, because in the unconscious there is no past or future, only a continuous, timeless present in which everything that has ever been felt or wanted is equally immediate and equally alive. This is one of the most profound and beautiful aspects of Freud's theory, and one of the most restful to contemplate when one is drifting towards sleep. The unconscious does not forget, Nothing is ever truly lost. Every experience, every feeling, every moment of connection or longing or joy or pain that you have ever had is still there, preserved with perfect fidelity, alive in the timeless dark of the unconscious. The people you have loved and lost are still there. The child you were is still there. The feelings too big to hold in ordinary waking life are still there, patient and full, waiting in the soft country behind closed eyes. Dreams are, among other things, visits to this country. They are the moments when the wall between ordinary time and that deeper, richer, stranger time grows thin, and things from far away come close again. Freud turned his attention also to the question of dream symbols, and this part of his work has perhaps been both the most popular and the most misunderstood. Because when people hear that Freud believed dreams are full of symbols, that certain objects and images in dreams consistently represent certain things, they often imagine a kind of fixed dictionary, a dream codebook in which a house always means this, and water always means that, and a journey always means the other thing. But Freud was actually quite careful and quite nuanced about this. He acknowledged that certain symbols do appear with remarkable consistency across people and cultures and time periods, symbols whose meaning seems almost universal, and that being aware of these recurring symbols can be genuinely useful when trying to interpret a dream. But he never proposed that symbols should override free association, that you should simply look up the symbol in the dictionary and announce the meaning without listening to what the specific dreamer has to say about it. The dreamer's own associations always come first. Always. The symbol is a hint, a suggestion, a possible starting point, not a definitive answer. Because the same image, a door, a tower, a garden, a river, will mean something different in the dream of a different person, will carry different emotional weight, will connect to different memories and wishes depending on who is dreaming it. The universal symbolic tendency is real, but it is never the whole story. The whole story is always specific, always individual, always personal. This is why dream interpretation without the dreamer is, for Freud, essentially useless. You cannot interpret someone else's dream from the outside by examining only its manifest content. You need the dreamer to associate, to wander, to follow the threads of connection back to their sources. He spoke about the forgetting of dreams, about why we forget dreams so quickly, why the most vivid and emotionally intense dream can fade to a few colorless fragments within minutes of waking, why we so often reach for the dream and find it already gone, already sinking back into wherever dreams come from. This forgetting is not accidental, Freud believed. It is the sensor reasserting itself. In sleep, the sensor relaxed enough to allow the dream to happen. In waking, fully back on duty, it works quickly to erase what was permitted to surface. The forgetting is part of the same defensive system as the disguise. The sensor is a diligent housekeeper, and it does not like what the night has tracked in from the unconscious. By waking, it has usually tidied most of it away. This is why Freud recommended keeping a dream journal, writing down dreams immediately upon waking, before the full alertness of consciousness has returned, and before the sensor has had time to complete its erasure work. Even partial fragments, even single images, even a feeling without a story, all of these are worth capturing, because all of these are threads that can potentially be followed back somewhere. The memory of a dream is itself a kind of dream residue, a sample of the unconscious, and even in its incomplete and fading form, it carries information. He considered also the relationship between dreams and neurosis, between the strange nighttime productions of the normal sleeping mind and the stranger, more persistent symptoms of the troubled waking mind. He believed they arose from the same source and operated through the same mechanisms. The neurotic symptom, like the dream, is a compromise formation, a way of expressing something that cannot be expressed directly, a way of simultaneously saying something and hiding it, of both revealing and concealing. The obsessive ritual, the hysterical paralysis, the irrational fear that cannot be reasoned away, all of these, Freud believed, are the waking mind's equivalents of the dream, attempts by suppressed material to find expression, attempts that are shaped and distorted by the same defensive forces that shape and distort the dream. And just as dreams can be interpreted, just as following the associations back from the manifest content can reveal the latent content, can uncover the hidden wish, so can symptoms be interpreted. This is, in fact, the core project of psychoanalysis: to read the dream, to read the symptom, to follow the disguised message back to its source, to bring into consciousness what has been living in the unconscious, and to discover that the thing which has been hidden is not, after all, as monstrous as the censor believed it to be. Consciousness is liberating. Recognizing a wish, naming it, understanding where it came from and why it was buried, this recognition often robs it of its power to produce symptoms, its compulsion to find indirect and troublesome expression. The monster in the dark is almost always smaller than it seemed when you were not allowed to look at it. There is something deeply gentle in this idea if you let yourself feel it. The unconscious is not the enemy. The censor is not the enemy. They are parts of the same mind doing what minds do, trying to protect and preserve and navigate a world full of contradictions. The wishes that have been pushed into the unconscious are not shameful in themselves. They are human, they are understandable, they arose in specific circumstances for specific reasons. They made sense at some point, even if they make a different kind of sense now. The whole elaborate system of dream work, of condensation and displacement and symbolic representation, is in a certain light not a deception, but a kind of mercy, a way for the mind to give its deepest material some form of expression, some outlet, some life, even when it cannot be given direct and waking expression. Dreams protect sleep, Freud noted, and in doing so they protect the dreamer. By providing a space in which the forbidden wish can be partially expressed and partially satisfied, the dream drains off enough pressure that sleep can continue and the dreamer can rest. Without this safety valve, the pressure of the unsatisfied, unacknowledged wishes would build and find other, more disruptive ways of breaking through. In this sense, dreaming is not just meaningful, it is necessary. It is one of the ways the mind takes care of itself in the dark. And here, drifting further now, further into the warm and drowsy country at the edge of sleep, it is worth holding for a moment this image of the dreaming mind taking care of itself. Every night, in every sleeping person, this quiet work is happening. The day's residue is being processed. The old wishes are being visited. The memories too large for ordinary consciousness are being folded and filed. The emotional charges accumulated during waking hours are being slowly, carefully, tenderly discharged into the soft fictional space of the dream, where they can burn through without burning anything down. There is something consoling about this. The night is not empty. The sleep is not a blank. Something is always happening in the dark hours, something attentive and purposeful, something working on your behalf even when you are not there to direct it, even when you are most completely and blissfully absent from your own experience. The dreaming mind is a faithful servant, sorting and processing and expressing and resolving, doing the interior work that the busy waking hours leave undone. Freud also spent careful time thinking about what he called the dream's navel, his evocative phrase for the point at which interpretation reaches its limit, the place where the threads of association go down so deep and become so densely entangled with one another that they can no longer be individually separated and followed. Every dream has such a point. Every dream has a place where the interpretation reaches the edge of the articulable, where the associations become a thicket rather than a path, where you are standing at the border of something so deep and so old and so fundamental that it resists resolution into clear propositional thought. This is the dream's navel, the place where the dream is rooted to the unknown. He was not troubled by this. He was, if anything, respectful of it. He did not believe that perfect and complete interpretation of any dream was possible or even desirable. He believed that interpretation could proceed a long way, could uncover a great deal, could be genuinely illuminating and genuinely therapeutic, but that the deepest roots of the dream, the oldest and most fundamental wishes, remained finally beyond full articulation. This was not a failure of the method. It was a recognition that the unconscious is, by its nature, not fully available to consciousness. The depths cannot be entirely brought into the light, and that is all right. That is perhaps even right. The mystery at the bottom of the dream is part of the dream. The unknowable kernel is part of what we are. So here we are, drifting gently through the main currents of Freud's long, careful, endlessly fascinating exploration of what happens when we sleep and dream. Here is what he found, laid out like a map of a country we visit every night without knowing it. Dreams are not random and not meaningless. They are among the most meaningful productions of the human mind. They have two levels, the surface story and the hidden story, and the relationship between these two levels is the heart of what makes them interpretable and important. The hidden story is almost always a wish, and that wish almost always has roots in the past, in childhood, in the earliest and most formative experiences of emotional life. The dream work, condensation, displacement, representability, secondary revision, is the system by which the hidden story is transformed into the surface story, by which the wish is encoded into the dream. Free association is the tool for reversing this transformation, for following the dream back to its source. And at the source, always, is something human, something understandable, something that arose in response to real experiences and real feelings, something that deserves not condemnation but compassionate understanding. The mind does not stop at the edge of sleep. It continues differently, in a different register, in a different language, but with the same commitment to processing and understanding and expressing the enormous complexity of human experience. Every dream is the mind doing its work. Every dream is the self in conversation with itself, in the dark, in the only language available, saying what cannot be said any other way. And as you feel yourself slipping now, feel the thoughts beginning to loosen and separate and drift like leaves on slow water. Feel the body growing heavier and the world outside growing softer and more distant. Consider that the place you are going is not empty. It is the same place Freud spent his life mapping and describing and trying to understand. It is the place where the old wishes live and the forgotten memories and the earliest, most fundamental feelings about the people and the world that shaped you. It is the timeless country behind the eyes, and it is full, and it is yours, and it has been waiting patiently all day for you to come back to it. Let the thoughts go one by one. There is no need to hold them now. Let the images come that want to come. Whatever arises in the soft dark behind your eyes is welcome, is safe, is part of you, is your mind doing its faithful nightly work. The dream will say what needs to be said. The night will do what the night does, and you can rest. You can really rest. You are in good hands, the deepest, most ancient, most patient hands of all, your own mind working quietly on your behalf, the way it has worked every night of your life, the way it will work tonight, the way it has always known how. Sleep now, drift now. The royal road is open and the country is warm and the deep places are very, very quiet and you are already on your way. There you go, softer now, slower now, down and gently down, into the dream. And if, as you drift, some image surfaces unbidden, a face, a room, a color, a feeling without a name, know that it is not random. Know that it is the first word of something your mind wants to say to you. Know that it is the beginning of the royal road, and that the road goes somewhere true, somewhere that is entirely and specifically yours. Freud spent a lifetime learning to read these words, these first quiet surfacings, and what he found was never monstrous. It was always underneath the disguise, underneath the symbol and the displacement and the condensed layers of meaning, something recognizably, unmistakably, tenderly human. That is the final thing to carry with you into sleep. The dreams that come tonight will be yours. They will be made of your material, your memories, your wishes, your particular and unrepeatable history. They will speak in your language, use your images, encode your specific and individual truths. No one else in the world will dream precisely your dream tonight. No one else has ever dreamed it or ever will. The unconscious is deep and the wishes are old and the machinery of the dream is ancient, but what it produces for you is new every night, created fresh in the hours of darkness, a gift from the deepest part of you to the part that wakes and wonders. Receive it gently, carry it lightly. And rest now in the long and ordinary miracle of sleep. Good night.